The woman stood on my porch with her arms crossed, her face twisted into something between disgust and triumph. She'd just told my 7-year-old son, my boy who'd spent the last year learning to walk again after the accident, that he was ruining the neighborhood aesthetic with his wheelchair ramp. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known as she waved that HOA violation notice in my face, was that I'd spent the last 15 years being trained to handle threats. And in that moment, looking at my son's face crumpling behind the screen door, she became one. Before you watch the full story, comment below where you're watching from. Also, like and subscribe for more stories like this. Let me take you back further than you might expect, because this story doesn't start with Patricia Morrison, or that ramp, or even that terrible Friday afternoon. It starts on a Tuesday morning in March, 14 months before we moved to Riverside Estates, when my phone rang at 3:47 a.m. Kabul time. I was in the middle of a training exercise with Afghan Special Forces when my CO pulled me aside. His face told me everything before his mouth did. "Fisher, you need to take this call. It's your wife." Sarah's voice was shaking so badly that I could barely understand her. "Michael, there's been an accident. Marcus, someone ran a red light. We're at the children's hospital. You need to come home." The next 72 hours are burned into my memory like a brand. The 20-hour flight back to San Diego, changing planes in Germany, unable to sleep, unable to eat, just sitting there with my hands clenched so tight my fingernails drew blood from my palms. Landing. The taxi to the hospital, walking through those automatic doors into the pediatric ICU where everything smelled like antiseptic and fear. Marcus was so small in that hospital bed. 7 years old and barely 60 pounds, with tubes running out of him like he was a machine that needed wiring. His left leg was in traction, pins inserted through his femur. Sarah sat beside him, holding his right hand, her face gray with exhaustion. "He asked for you," she whispered when I came in. "Right before they put him under for surgery, he said, 'When's Daddy coming home?'" I kissed his forehead, careful not to disturb any of the equipment. His skin was hot, fever from the internal injuries. The surgeon had already explained everything to Sarah: shattered pelvis, torn sciatic nerve, internal bleeding they'd had to repair. They'd saved his life, but his leg, the nerve damage was extensive. "Will he walk?" I'd asked. The surgeon, a tired-looking woman named Dr. Patel, had given me the look I'd seen too many times in field hospitals overseas, the one that says, "I'm going to give you hope. Still, I'm going to make sure you understand reality first. We won't know the extent of the nerve damage for several months. Children are remarkably resilient, but you need to prepare for the possibility that Marcus may need mobility assistance for the rest of his life. Wheelchair, walker, and extensive physical therapy. I'm sorry." That night, I sat in the hospital chapel, me, a guy who hadn't prayed since boot camp, and I made a deal with whoever might be listening. Bring him back to us. Let him live. Whatever it takes, whatever sacrifices need to be made, I'll make them. Just let my son live. Marcus survived. But the road back was longer and harder than any deployment I'd ever served. The first 3 months were surgery, pain management, and watching my son cry because he couldn't understand why his body didn't work anymore. They sent us home in June with a pediatric wheelchair, a walker, and a referral to a physical therapist named Monica, who looked like a yoga instructor but had the discipline of a drill sergeant. "Marcus," she told him on their first session, "your brain knows how to walk. Your leg just forgot how to listen, so we're going to teach it again. And it's going to be hard. There are going to be days when you want to quit. But I've worked with kids who've come back from worse, and you know what they all had in common?" Marcus shook his head, his eyes wide. "They were stubborn. The stubborn ones always win. So are you stubborn?" A small smile crossed his face. "Dad says I'm the most stubborn kid he knows." Monica grinned. "Then we're going to get along just fine." What followed was 9 months of the most grueling work I've ever witnessed. 3 times a week, Marcus went to physical therapy. Monica would have him do exercises that made grown men weep, stretching damaged nerves, forcing atrophied muscles to remember their purpose. taking step after agonizing step between parallel bars while sweat poured down his face. He never quit, not once. Sarah and I took turns being the strong ones because we couldn't both break down at the same time. On the nights when I'd find her crying in the laundry room, I'd hold her and tell her Marcus was going to be okay. On the mornings when I'd wake up at 0400 with my heart racing, reliving the moment I'd gotten that phone call, Sarah would make me coffee and remind me that Marcus was alive, he was fighting, and we were going to get through this. By February, 11 months after the accident, Marcus could walk short distances with his walker. The wheelchair became backup, something he used for longer trips or when he was tired. His left leg was weaker, would always be weaker, but he was mobile. He was independent. That's when Sarah started talking about moving. "We need a fresh start," she said one night after Marcus had gone to bed. "This house, every time I drive past that intersection where it happened, I can't breathe. Marcus needs a new school, somewhere the kids don't remember him as the boy in the wheelchair. We need to build new memories." I was up for re-enlistment that spring. 15 years in, I could have made a career of it. But every time I thought about deploying again, leaving Sarah and Marcus for 6 months or a year, something in my chest clenched tight. I'd almost lost them once. I wasn't going to risk it again. "Okay," I told her. "Start looking. Find us a home." Sarah found Riverside Estates in April. She drove up to show me on a Saturday morning, practically vibrating with excitement. "Michael, wait until you see it. The schools are amazing. Pinewood Elementary has a fully accessible campus and an incredible special education department. The neighborhood is safe, everyone's friendly, and the house, God, the house is perfect. 3 bedrooms, a backyard for Marcus, and it's all on one level. No stairs inside." We walked through it that afternoon. She was right. It was perfect. Hardwood floors that would work with Marcus's walker, wide doorways, and a bathroom that could be modified if needed. The backyard had a flat lawn where Marcus could play. The front had a small porch with 3 steps leading up from the sidewalk. "We'd need to build a ramp," I said, examining the entrance. "I already talked to a contractor," Sarah said. "He said it would take a weekend, maybe $2,000 for materials and labor. Simple wooden ramp, painted to match the house." I looked at the neighborhood. The neat lawns, the American flags, the basketball hoops and driveways. It looked like the kind of place where kids rode bikes and neighbors knew each other's names. It looked like the America I'd spent 15 years defending. "Let's do it," I said. We closed on the house in June. I officially separated from the Navy in July, terminal leave carrying me through to August. We spent those weeks packing up our old life, saying goodbye to Marcus's therapy team, though Monica gave us a referral to someone equally good in our new town, and preparing for the fresh start. Marcus was excited in the way only a 7-year-old can be. "Do you think there will be kids my age? Do you think they'll want to play with me? Can we get a dog? Will I have my own room?" "Yes, probably. We'll see." "And definitely yes," Sarah told him, ruffling his hair. We moved in on a Saturday in late August. The house was everything we'd hoped. Our furniture fits perfectly. Marcus picked out blue paint for his room. Sarah started unpacking kitchen boxes while I began the real work, making this house accessible for our son. The contractor came on Sunday morning. His name was Bill, a weathered guy in his 60s who'd built half the houses in the development. He measured the porch, sketched out the design, and gave me a price. "I can have this done by Tuesday," he said. "You want it stained or painted?" "Painted, light gray to match the siding." "You got it. This for the little guy?" He nodded toward Marcus, who was investigating the backyard. "Yeah, an accident last year. He's walking more now, but he needs the ramp for his walker and for days when his leg hurts." Bill's face softened. "My granddaughter has cerebral palsy, uses a wheelchair. Built her a ramp at my daughter's house last summer. These things are lifesavers." He paused. "You check with the HOA about this?" I blinked. "HOA? Yeah, Riverside Estates has a homeowners association. Pretty active one from what I hear. Usually they want approval for exterior modifications, paint colors, fences, stuff like that. Ramps should be fine since it's an accessibility thing, but you might want to give them a heads up. I'll look into it, I said, though honestly I didn't think much of it. The ramp was a medical necessity. What HOA would have a problem with that? Bill finished the ramp on Tuesday afternoon. It was perfect, sturdy, with a gentle slope that met ADA guidelines, painted to match the house with non-slip treads for safety. Marcus tested it immediately, walking up and down with his walker, his face breaking into a huge grin. "Dad, look! I can do it by myself!" Sarah took a photo. Marcus at the top of the ramp, Walker in front of him, beaming like he'd just summited Everest. She posted it on Facebook with the caption, "New house, new ramp, new adventures. So proud of this kid." 6 million people would eventually see that photo. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We spent the next 2 weeks settling in. I enrolled Marcus at Pinewood Elementary. Sarah started her new job as a nurse at the regional hospital. I began looking for work. Turned out former Navy SEALs had plenty of options in private security consulting, though the hours were better and the pay was worse than military. The neighborhood seemed friendly enough. Our next-door neighbor, a retired accountant named George, came over with a welcome basket. The family across the street had 2 kids around Marcus's age. We got invited to a block party scheduled for Labor Day weekend. It felt like we'd made the right choice, like this was where we were supposed to be. Then Patricia Morrison knocked on our door. It was a Thursday evening around 6 p.m. Sarah was making dinner. Marcus was doing homework at the kitchen table. I was in the garage unpacking the last few boxes when I heard the doorbell. Sarah answered it. I heard a woman's voice, crisp and formal, introducing herself. "Hello, I'm Patricia Morrison, president of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association. I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." I came in from the garage, wiping dust off my hands. Patricia stood in our doorway holding a 3-ring binder that looked like it could be used as a defensive weapon. She was dressed like she was going to a business meeting. Slacks, blouse, pearls. Her hair was the kind of blonde that came from a salon, styled in a way that probably required industrial-strength hairspray. "Michael Fisher," I said, extending my hand. Her handshake was firm, professional, and about as warm as a January morning in Fallujah. "Pleased to meet you. I'm here to provide you with your HOA welcome packet and to go over some of the key community guidelines." She stepped inside without being invited, which should have been my first clue. Sarah and I exchanged a glance as Patricia settled herself at our dining room table, opening the binder with the efficiency of someone conducting a military briefing. "Now then," she began, "Riverside Estates is a premier planned community with strict architectural and behavioral standards designed to maintain property values and ensure a harmonious living environment. All homeowners sign a covenant agreement acknowledging these standards. I assume you reviewed the HOA bylaws before purchasing." "We reviewed them," Sarah said carefully. We had. Skimmed them, at least. They'd seemed standard. Keep your lawn mowed, no cars on blocks in the driveway, that kind of thing. Excellent. Then you're aware that any exterior modifications to your property require prior approval from the Architectural Review Board. This includes paint colors, landscaping changes, fencing, and structures. Something cold settled in my stomach. Structures? Yes. Decks, sheds, pergolas, anything that alters the exterior appearance of your home. She flipped through the binder, pulled out a highlighted section. Article 7, Section 2. No exterior alterations, modifications, or structures shall be erected, installed, or maintained without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Board. It's quite clear. I glanced toward the front door, where you could see the edge of our new ramp through the screen. We built a wheelchair ramp. For our son. He has mobility issues from an accident. Patricia's expression didn't change. "I saw the ramp when I drove up. It's actually one of the reasons I prioritized your welcome visit. The board did not approve that ramp." Sarah's voice went tight. Our son needs that ramp. He can't navigate the stairs safely with his walker. I understand that, and I'm sympathetic. However, the rules apply to everyone equally. If we allow one homeowner to bypass the approval process, it sets a precedent that undermines the entire system. She pulled out a form from her binder. You'll need to submit a request for retroactive approval. The board meets monthly. Our next meeting is September 15th, so you should hear back by the end of that week. And in the meantime, I asked. In the meantime, technically, the structure is in violation. However, given that you're new residents and this appears to be an honest oversight, I'm willing to waive any fines pending the board's decision. She smiled, like she was doing us a tremendous favor. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, walker clacking against the tile floor. Mom, I finished my homework. Can I? He stopped when he saw we had company. Patricia's gaze flicked to him, to the walker, then back to us. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite sympathy, but something close to it. Hello there. Marcus, always friendly, smiled. Hi, I'm Marcus. Hello, Marcus. I'm Mrs. Morrison. I live just down the street. Cool. Do you have any kids? I have 2 grandchildren, but they don't live nearby. She turned back to us, her business-like demeanor snapping back into place. As I was saying, apply and the board will review it. In the meantime, I'd recommend reading through the entire bylaws document. We take our community standards seriously here. She stood, gathering her binder. Sarah showed her to the door, and I heard them exchange pleasantries. Patricia reminding Sarah about the Labor Day block party, Sarah thanking her for stopping by in a tone that suggested she was anything but thankful. When the door closed, Sarah turned to me. Michael, we have to apply for permission to keep our son's ramp. That's what the lady says. This is insane. It's a medical necessity. They can't. Let's not panic yet. We'll apply, explain the situation, and they'll approve it. It's a formality. But even as I said it, I felt uneasy. There was something about Patricia Morrison's tone, the way she'd looked at that ramp like it was a personal affront. Like we'd committed some crime by making our home accessible for our disabled son. Still, I'm a guy who believes in following the rules. I'd spent 15 years in the military where rules meant order, safety, and mission success. So that night, I sat down and filled out the Architectural Review Board application. It was 6 pages long. They wanted photographs from multiple angles, detailed measurements, material specifications, the name and license number of the contractor. They wanted an explanation of why the modification was necessary. They wanted to know if we'd considered alternatives. I attached everything they asked for. Photos of the ramp from every angle, Bill's contractor information, Marcus's medical records from the accident, from his surgeries, from his physical therapy sessions. A letter from Dr. Patel explaining the medical necessity of mobility aids. A letter from Monica, his physical therapist, detailing his progress and ongoing needs. I put together a package that would have satisfied a Pentagon Oversight Committee. Sarah read over it before I submitted it. This is humiliating, she said quietly. We have to prove to a bunch of strangers that our son deserves to leave his own house. It's bureaucracy, I told her. Stupid, unnecessary bureaucracy. But we'll get through it. I applied on Friday, August 30th. The board was scheduled to meet on September 15th. They had 15 days to review our request. We went to the Labor Day block party that weekend, met more neighbors, most of them friendly. Marcus played with the kids from across the street, Jenny and Tyler, ages 6 and 8. They didn't care about his walker. They just wanted someone to play superhero with. George, our neighbor, pulled me aside at one point. Hey, I heard Patricia came by to welcome you. How'd that go? She's thorough, I said diplomatically. George snorted. That's one word for it. Patricia takes the HOA stuff pretty seriously. Don't let her get to you. Most of us think she's a bit much. But she means well. I wanted to believe that. I really did. The denial came back on September 18th, 3 days after the board meeting. I found the email when I was checking my phone during lunch. Subject line, Architectural Review Board Decision, 847 Maple Grove Lane. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Fisher, the Riverside Estates Architectural Review Board has carefully considered your request for retroactive approval of an exterior wooden ramp structure constructed at 847 Maple Grove Lane. After a thorough review, the board has determined that the structure does not meet community aesthetic standards as outlined in Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws. All exterior modifications must maintain visual harmony with surrounding properties and adhere to established architectural guidelines. While the board acknowledges the medical circumstances described in your application, we must balance individual needs with the community's collective interest in maintaining property values and aesthetic consistency. The board has identified the following concerns. 1. The ramp's current design and placement create a visual disruption to the street-facing facade of your property. 2. The structure was not constructed using materials consistent with the development's architectural guidelines, weathered wood stain preferred over painted surfaces for outdoor structures. 3. Alternative solutions that would be less visually prominent were not explored. The board respectfully suggests you consider the following alternatives. Interior home modifications to accommodate mobility challenges. Rear or side entrance access points that would be less visible from the street, a temporary removable ramp solution that could be stored when not in use. We understand this may be not very pleasant, but we must enforce our bylaws consistently to preserve the character and value of our community. Should you choose to pursue an alternative design that addresses the board's concerns, you are welcome to submit a new application. Per Article 12 of the bylaws, you have 14 days from receipt of this notice to remove the non-compliant structure. Failure to comply will result in fines of $100 per day until the violation is remedied. Sincerely, the Riverside Estates Architectural Review Board, Patricia Morrison, President. I read it 3 times. Interior modifications, rear entrance access, a temporary ramp that could be stored. They wanted my son to stay inside. Or to go out the back door like he was something shameful that needed to be hidden. Or to wait while we assembled and disassembled a ramp every single time he wanted to leave the house. My hands were shaking when I called Sarah. We got the board's decision. And they denied it. They want us to remove the ramp in 14 days. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "What did you just say?" I read her the email. With each sentence, I could hear her breathing get shorter, sharper. Interior modifications? Her voice was rising now, the way it does when she's moving past shock into fury. They want Marcus to stay inside? They want us to hide him? That's what it sounds like. Michael, I can't process this. Our son almost died. He spent 9 months learning to walk again, and these people, these strangers, are telling us that their property values are more important than his independence? I know. What are we going to do? I thought about that. About the 15 years I'd spent following orders, trusting the chain of command, believing in the system. But I'd also spent those 15 years learning how to fight when the system failed. How to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. We're going to fight, I said. We're going to fight and we're going to win. That night, after Marcus went to bed, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table with our laptops and started researching. Turns out, we weren't the first family to face this kind of discrimination. The Fair Housing Act, passed in 1968 and amended in 1988, specifically prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in housing. It requires housing providers, including HOAs, to make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities. A wheelchair ramp for a disabled child is literally the textbook example of a reasonable accommodation. They can't do this, Sarah said, reading through a legal blog. It's federal law. They have to allow it. They can't do it legally, I corrected. But they're doing it anyway, which means either they don't know the law or they're betting we won't fight back. I thought about Patricia Morrison and that binder of hers, the way she'd looked at Marcus's ramp like it was graffiti on a church. I thought about the board's suggestion that we use interior modifications or rear entrances. They were betting we'd be too tired, too intimidated, too overwhelmed to fight back. That we'd just moved, that we had a disabled child to care for, that we wouldn't have the time or resources or knowledge to challenge them. They were wrong. I started making a list of people I could call. In 15 years as a SEAL, you make connections. Guys who get out and go to law school, guys who work in advocacy, guys who know guys. The military takes care of its own, and there's an entire network of veterans helping each other navigate civilian life. First call, Rodriguez. Diego Rodriguez had been in my squad for 6 years. We'd run operations together in Iraq and Afghanistan, and trusted each other with our lives. He'd separated 3 years before me and used his GI Bill to go to law school. Last I heard, he was working for a nonprofit legal aid organization in Los Angeles. He answered on the second ring. Fisher? Holy shit, man, how long's it been? Too long. How's civilian life treating you? Can't complain. Not getting shot at is a nice change of pace. What about you? Heard you finally hung up the trident. Yeah, separated a few months ago. Moved the family to a new place, trying to give my kid a fresh start. Kid? Man, I didn't even know you had kids. Marcus, he's 7, had a bad accident last year, been recovering, which is actually why I'm calling. I explained the situation, the accident, the ramp, the HOA's denial. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, which told me he was in lawyer mode. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. They suggested interior modifications? For a 7-year-old with a walker? Are these people insane? That's one theory. Mike, this is a slam-dunk Fair Housing Act violation. I mean, textbook. They're required by federal law to grant reasonable accommodations for disabilities. A ramp is reasonable. Period. End of story. Can you help me? Brother, I'm going to do better than that. I'm going to bury these people in paperwork so deep they'll need spelunking equipment to find their way out. Send me everything. The denial letter, your application, Marcus's medical records, the whole package. I'll draft a response that'll make them shit their designer khakis. I don't have money for... Did I ask for money? You carried me out of a firefight in Helmand when I took shrapnel in my leg. I think I still owe you. Besides, this pisses me off on principle. Nobody messes with a kid's wheelchair ramp. Nobody. I sent him the documents that night. Second call, Captain Brennan. Jack Brennan had been my commanding officer for 4 years. The man was a legend in the teams. 30 years of service, countless commendations, and the kind of tactical mind that made other officers look like they were playing checkers while he played 4D chess. He'd retired 2 years ago and now worked as a consultant for defense contractors. Fisher, his voice boomed through the phone. Heard you pulled the plug. How's life on the outside? Complicated, sir. It's Jack now. You're not in my chain anymore. What's going on? I gave him the situation report, just like I would have during a mission brief. Clear, concise, tactical. When I finished, there was a pause. Then, these HOA people have any idea who they're fucking with? I don't think so, sir, Jack. Good. Keep it that way. Never let the enemy know your capabilities until it's too late for them to adjust. You need resources, connections, legal support? Rodriguez is handling the legal side. What I need is pressure. These people respond to property values and community reputation. I need someone who knows how to manage a campaign. I know a guy, Maria Vasquez. She's a journalist, used to embed with us overseas. Now she does investigative reporting on civil rights issues. If there's one thing she hates, it's powerful people picking on the little guy. Or in this case, a disabled kid. Let me reach out to her. Thank you, Jack. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're sitting on your porch watching your son use that ramp while these HOA bastards are writing you an apology check. Third call, Chen. Tommy Chen and I had served together early in my career. He'd been medically separated after an IED blast, left him with a traumatic brain injury and partial paralysis on his left side. Instead of letting it destroy him, he'd become one of the most vocal disability rights advocates in the veteran community. He ran a nonprofit that helped disabled vets navigate the VA system and fight for their benefits. "Michael Fisher," he said when he answered, "I heard through the grapevine you were back stateside. How's the family?" "That's actually why I'm calling." I explained Marcus's situation. Chen listened, and I could hear him getting angrier with each detail. "Let me get this straight," he said when I finished. "Your 7-year-old son, who nearly died in a car accident, who spent a year learning to walk again, needs a ramp to access his own home. And these HOA people are saying it's an aesthetic problem? That's the size of it. Michael, I deal with this kind of ableist bullshit every single day. The VA pulls it, insurance companies pull it, and yeah, HOAs pull it. They always dress it up in fancy language about rules and standards and community values. But what they're really saying is that disabled people are inconvenient, that we're ugly, that we should hide ourselves away so that abled people don't have to be reminded that disability exists. How do I fight it? You fight it by making noise, by making this public, by forcing them to say out loud in front of everyone that they value their property values more than a child's right to leave his home. These people survive in the shadows, Mike. They rely on people being too tired or too scared to push back, so you drag them into the light and watch them scramble. You got any media contacts? Dozens. And I'll call every single one of them if you want. This is exactly the kind of story that needs to be told. Do it. By midnight, I had an army assembling. Rodriguez was drafting legal documents. Brennan was reaching out to Maria Vasquez. Chen was preparing to contact disability rights organizations and media outlets. Sarah watched me work, making calls, sending emails, and coordinating. Finally, she asked, "What exactly are we doing here?" I looked at her. "We're going to war." The next morning, I sent an email to Patricia Morrison and the HOA board. "Dear Mrs. Morrison and board members, I am writing in response to your denial of our request for accommodation regarding the wheelchair ramp at our property. I must respectfully inform you that your denial appears to violate the Fair Housing Act, 42 U.S.C., paragraph 3601 et seq. Specifically, the provisions requiring reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities. The ramp in question is a medical necessity for our 7-year-old son, who has mobility limitations resulting from a severe accident. This is not an aesthetic choice or a convenience. It is the difference between our son being able to leave his own home independently or being confined inside. We are requesting that you immediately reverse your decision and approve the ramp. If you are unwilling to do so, please be aware that we are prepared to pursue all available legal remedies, including filing a complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development and seeking injunctive relief in federal court. We hope it doesn't come to that. We moved to this neighborhood hoping to find a community. We'd still like to believe that's possible. Sincerely, Michael and Sarah Fisher CC, Diego Rodriguez, Esquiers, Southern California Legal Aid Foundation. The CC was deliberate, a shot across the bow, a signal that we weren't just angry homeowners, we had legal representation. Patricia responded 4 hours later. "Mr. Fisher, I appreciate your concerns, but I must remind you that the board's decision was made in accordance with our established bylaws, which all homeowners agreed to upon purchase. We are not in violation of any laws. The Fair Housing Act allows for reasonable accommodations, yes, but reasonable is determined on a case-by-case basis. The board has determined that less visually intrusive alternatives exist for your situation. The 14-day clock started on September 18th. You have 10 days remaining to comply with the removal order. I encourage you to work with us rather than against us. We are not your enemies. Best regards, Patricia Morrison, HOA President, Riverside Estates." I forwarded the email to Rodriguez. His response came back in minutes. "Less visually intrusive alternatives? These fucking people. Give me 24 hours. What Rodriguez produced in those 24 hours was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, a 12-page letter dense with case citations and statutory references, laying out in excruciating detail exactly how the HOA was violating federal law. He cited cases, dozens of them, HOAs that had tried to block wheelchair ramps and had been sued into oblivion. Cases where courts had awarded not just injunctive relief, but significant damages for the emotional distress caused by discrimination. He explained in language a first-year law student could understand that reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act doesn't mean what the HOA thinks it means. It doesn't mean whatever the HOA decides is reasonable. It means accommodations that don't create an undue financial or administrative burden. A wheelchair ramp for a disabled child costs $2,000 and requires zero ongoing maintenance from the HOA. It creates no undue burden. Therefore, it's reasonable. End of analysis. The letter concluded with a deadline. Approve the ramp within 5 business days, or we file in federal court. Rodriguez also prepared a complaint, ready to file with HUD. He sent both documents to me for review. "This is beautiful," I told him over the phone. "It's overkill," he admitted. "But sometimes you need to bring a bazooka to a knife fight. Make sure they understand the stakes." I sent Rodriguez's letter on September 22nd. 5 days left until the HOA's removal deadline. 5 days until they expect us to tear down our son's ramp. Those 5 days were the longest of my life. Sarah was a wreck. She's a nurse. She handles trauma, codes, death notifications. She's one of the strongest people I know. But this broke through her armor in a way combat medicine never had. "It's the powerlessness," she told me one night. "In the ER, I can do something. I can stop bleeding, start an IV, call for help. We've done everything right. We followed their rules, we submitted their forms, we provided their documentation, and they still said no. And now we're just waiting." Marcus didn't understand what was happening. He knew people were upset about his ramp, but he couldn't grasp why. He'd catch Sarah crying in the kitchen or hear me on the phone with Rodriguez going over legal strategy. "Dad," he asked me on day 3 of the waiting period, "are they going to take away my ramp?" I knelt down to his level. "Not if I have anything to say about it, buddy." "But Mrs. Morrison said," "Mrs. Morrison is wrong. Your ramp stays, I promise." Making promises like that to a 7-year-old is dangerous, because if you break them, you don't just lose credibility. You teach them the world is unfair and their father is powerless to protect them. I wasn't going to let that happen. On September 24th, 3 days before the removal deadline, I got a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Fisher, this is Maria Vasquez. Captain Brennan gave me your contact information. He said you might have a story I'd be interested in." Maria Vasquez had a voice like gravel and honey. Rough around the edges, but smooth when she needed to be. Brennan had told me she'd embedded with SEAL teams in Afghanistan, had seen combat up close, and wasn't afraid of powerful people. "Captain Brennan said you're looking into disability rights violations," I said. "That's one of my beats, yes. He gave me the broad strokes. HOA trying to force you to remove your disabled son's wheelchair ramp. That true?" "Every word. Tell me the story, all of it. Don't leave anything out." So I did. I told her about the accident, about Marcus's recovery, about the ramp. I told her about Patricia Morrison's welcome visit, the denial letter, the suggestion that we use interior modifications or hide the ramp in the back. I could hear her typing furiously on the other end. "Mr. Fisher, I've covered a lot of disability discrimination cases. This one is particularly egregious. An HOA targeting a child, suggesting he use the back door like he's something shameful. That's not just illegal, it's morally repugnant." "Can you write about it?" "I can do better than that. I work for the Southern California Investigative Network. We're a nonprofit journalism organization that focuses on civil rights issues. When we publish a story, it gets picked up. Are you willing to go on record? Be interviewed? Let me photograph the ramp? Photograph Marcus?" I hesitated. "I don't want my son exploited." "Neither do I. I'm not looking for pity porn here. I'm looking to expose systemic ableism and HOA overreach. Marcus doesn't have to be in any photos if you don't want. But the story needs faces. It needs to be real. Otherwise, it's just another abstract legal battle. I talked to Sarah that night. We debated for 2 hours, weighing Marcus's privacy against the power of going public. If we do this, Sarah said, there's no going back. This becomes part of his story, part of our story. Everyone will know. Everyone already knows he's disabled, I pointed out. The ramp announces it every time someone walks past our house, which is exactly what the HOA wants to hide. Maybe it's time we stop hiding. Maybe it's time we make them uncomfortable instead. Sarah looked at the photo on her phone, the one she'd taken of Marcus on the ramp that first day, beaming with pride. Okay, she said quietly. Let's do it. Maria came to our house the next day, September 25th. She was in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of eyes that said she'd seen terrible things and hadn't looked away. She interviewed us for 3 hours. She asked about the accident, about Marcus's recovery, about our decision to move. She asked about the HOA's response, read through all the documentation, photographed the denial letter. Then she asked to meet Marcus. He came home from school at 3:30, getting off the special needs bus that dropped him at the end of our driveway. I watched him navigate down the sidewalk with his walker, then up the ramp. His movements were still careful, deliberate, but he was getting stronger every day. Maria watched from the porch. I saw her jaw tighten. Marcus looked up and saw the stranger. Hi, who are you? I'm Maria. I'm a reporter. Your dad said I could come visit. Cool. Are you going to write about me? Maybe a little bit. Is that okay? He shrugged. Sure. Can you make sure you spell my name right? Marcus. My teacher always spells it Markus, and it drives me crazy. Maria smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her. I promise. Marcus with a C. Got it. She didn't interview him, didn't ask him invasive questions. Just watched him be a kid, dumping his backpack, getting a snack, telling his mom about his day at school. She took one photo. Marcus at the bottom of the ramp, looking up toward his front door, walker in hand. Before she left, she turned to me. This story runs tomorrow morning. Once it's out there, things are going to move fast. The HOA will likely lawyer up. You might get hate mail, people defending property values, saying you're playing the victim, but you'll also get support. A lot of it. Are you ready? I've been ready since that woman stood on my porch and told my son he was ruining her view. Maria nodded. Good, because we're about to make a lot of noise. Maria's story went live at 6 a.m. on September 26th, one day before the HOA's removal deadline. The headline was perfect. HOA demands disabled 7-year-old remove wheelchair ramp, suggests he use less visible back entrance. She'd written it with surgical precision. Every fact was documented. Every quote was attributed. She included excerpts from the HOA's denial letter with particular emphasis on the suggestions for interior modifications and rear entrance access. She'd interviewed Dr. Patel, Marcus's surgeon, who explained the medical necessity of mobility aids. She'd interviewed Monica, his physical therapist, who described his year-long battle to walk again. And she'd interviewed Tommy Chen, who provided context about systemic ableism in housing. What this HOA is essentially saying, Chen was quoted, is that disabled people should be invisible, that their medical needs are less important than curb appeal. This is exactly the kind of discrimination the Fair Housing Act was designed to prevent. The photo Maria chose was the one of Marcus at the bottom of the ramp looking up. You couldn't see his face clearly, just a small boy with a walker standing before a simple wooden ramp that led to his home. The caption read, 7-year-old Marcus Fisher uses a walker due to injuries from a car accident. His HOA has given him until September 27th to remove the ramp. By 8 a.m., the story had been shared 2,000 times. By 10 a.m., it had been picked up by 3 national news outlets. By noon, it was trending on Twitter. My phone started ringing at 7:30 a.m. and didn't stop. News stations wanting interviews, disability advocacy organizations offering support, lawyers offering pro bono representation, people from all over the country, some who'd faced similar HOA battles, some who were just furious on Marcus's behalf. Sarah's Facebook post, the one with Marcus smiling on the ramp, was being shared and reshared. The comments section was overwhelmed with support. I'm a wheelchair user, and I've dealt with this kind of discrimination my entire life. Thank you for fighting back. Property values are more important than a child's independence. What is wrong with these people? I live in an HOA, and I'm embarrassed. This is not what communities are supposed to be about. Former combat medic here. I've seen what vehicle accidents can do. The fact that this kid is walking at all is a miracle, and they want to take away his ramp? Unbelievable. But there was also backlash, a smaller but vocal group defending the HOA. Rules are rules. They should have gotten approval first. HOAs exist to protect property values. If everyone just did whatever they wanted, these neighborhoods would fall apart. This is emotional manipulation. Nobody's saying the kid can't have a ramp, just that it needs to meet community standards. I read those comments and felt my blood pressure rise. Sarah had to pull the phone out of my hand. Don't engage, she said. Let the story speak for itself. At 2 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a professional-sounding woman introduced herself as James Carrington's assistant. Mr. Carrington is the attorney representing the Riverside Estates HOA, she explained. He'd like to schedule a call with you to discuss a possible resolution. I'm listening. Would you be available for a call at 4 p.m. today? I'll be here. I immediately called Rodriguez. The HOA's lawyer wants to talk. They're panicking, Rodriguez said with satisfaction. The story's out there. They're getting destroyed in the court of public opinion, and they know they're going to lose in actual court. They want to settle before this gets worse. What do I ask for? Everything. Approval of the ramp, no fines, revised bylaws, and an apology. Don't settle for less. You have all the leverage right now. At 4 p.m., my phone rang. James Carrington had the smooth voice of someone who spent his life negotiating settlements. Mr. Fisher, I want to start by saying that the HOA deeply regrets the situation has reached this point. After reviewing the case in light of recent media attention and legal consultation, the board believes there may have been some miscommunication regarding your request. Miscommunication, I repeated flatly. Yes. The board's intent was never to deny your son access to necessary medical accommodations. Rather, there were concerns about the approval process and whether alternative designs might better serve both your family's needs and the community's aesthetic standards. Mr. Carrington, I'm going to stop you right there. Your board didn't express concerns about process. They told us to use the back door. They suggested interior modifications, which means they wanted my son to stay inside. They treated his medical equipment like it was an eyesore that needed to be hidden. So let's not pretend this was a miscommunication. There was a pause. I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm angry. There's a difference. Now, what are you offering? The board is prepared to approve your ramp retroactively and waive all pending fines. We believe this resolves the matter to everyone's satisfaction. Not good enough. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry. Your board violated federal law. They discriminated against my disabled son. They caused my family enormous stress. And now that they're getting bad press, they want to approve the ramp and pretend none of this happened quietly? No. That's not how this works. Mr. Fisher, I think you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. We're offering you exactly what you asked for in the first place, approval of the ramp. If you refuse and insist on litigation, you'll spend months in court, incur legal expenses, and I have pro bono representation from the Southern California Legal Aid Foundation, and I have time. Do you know what you have? A federal discrimination lawsuit waiting to be filed, media attention that's only going to get worse, and board members who are probably starting to realize that their property values are taking a hit from the negative publicity. I could almost hear him recalculating through the phone. What do you want? He asked finally. First, immediate approval of the ramp with no conditions. Second, 0 fines or penalties of any kind. Third, a formal written apology from the board to my family. Fourth, revision of the HOA bylaws to explicitly allow accessibility modifications without board approval, with language confirming compliance with the Fair Housing Act. And fifth, Patricia Morrison's resignation as HOA president. Mr. Fisher, the board cannot force Mrs. Morrison to resign. She's an elected official. Then I guess we'll see you in court. Oh, and Mr. Carrington, Good Morning America called this morning. They want to interview Marcus and me on Monday. I'm thinking about saying yes. The silence stretched out. I could imagine Carrington doing the math, the cost of litigation, the continued media storm, the damage to the HOA's reputation, and, ironically, to property values. I'll need to consult with the board, he said finally. Can I call you back tomorrow? You have until 5 p.m. After that, Rodriguez files in federal court and I confirm the interview with Good Morning America. I hung up and immediately called Rodriguez to update him. He laughed. You threatened them with Good Morning America? Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Was I too aggressive? Mike, you're negotiating from a position of total strength. They violated federal law. They look like monsters in the media, and they know they're going to lose in court. Be aggressive. Make them squirm. That night, Sarah and I sat on the porch with the ramp, and watched the sun set over our neighborhood. Across the street, I could see the family with the 2 kids. George next door was watering his lawn. Everything looked normal, peaceful. Do you think they'll agree? Sarah asked. They don't have a choice. We've backed them into a corner. I feel bad for Patricia. I looked at her in surprise. You feel bad for the woman who told our son he was ruining the neighborhood? I feel bad for anyone who's about to lose everything because they made a mistake, even if it was a terrible mistake, even if she deserves it. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm not saying she shouldn't face consequences. I'm just saying I don't think she's evil. I think she's someone who got so caught up in rules and property values that she forgot to be human. And now her life is about to implode. That's very compassionate of you. One of us has to be. You're in full SEAL mode. Identify target, eliminate threat, complete mission. She wasn't wrong. I'd approached this the way I'd approached operations overseas. Assess the situation. Gather resources. Execute with overwhelming force. The HOA had threatened my family, so I'd assembled an army and prepared to destroy them. But Sarah's words stuck with me. Patricia Morrison was about to become a cautionary tale, an example of what happens when petty power meets federal law. Her name would be attached to this story forever. She'd probably have to move, sell her house, start over somewhere else. Was that justice, or was it revenge? I didn't know. All I knew was that Marcus deserved better than what she'd tried to do to him. The next morning, September 27th, the day the ramp was supposed to be removed, started with a knock on the door at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Patricia Morrison standing on my porch. She looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled. She wasn't wearing pearls. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Mr. Fisher," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "Can we talk? Please?" Sarah appeared behind me. "Michael." I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. "You have 5 minutes." Patricia looked down at the ramp beneath our feet, then back up at me. "I saw the news story yesterday. I read the comments. Hundreds of people telling me I'm a monster, that I'm discriminating against a disabled child, that I should be ashamed. Are you?" Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. God, yes. I've been awake all night, reading those comments, looking at the photo of your son with his walker, and I kept asking myself how I got here. How I became the person who would tell a 7-year-old boy that his wheelchair ramp was an aesthetic problem. She wiped her eyes. My grandson is 8 years old. His name is Jackson. When I saw that photo yesterday, I kept thinking, what if it was Jackson? What if he'd been in an accident and he needed a ramp and someone treated him the way I treated Marcus? But it wasn't Jackson, I said. It was my son. And you treated him like he was damaged property that hurt your property values. I know. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She was crying now, not bothering to hide it. I spent 15 years as HOA president, 15 years enforcing rules, maintaining standards, keeping property values high. And somewhere along the way, the rules became more important than the people. I forgot why we have communities in the first place. I didn't say anything. Just waited. The board met last night, emergency session. They asked me to resign, said my continued presence as president was damaging the community's reputation. She laughed bitterly. They're right. I am damaging it. I've turned us into the neighborhood that bullies disabled children. So you're resigning? I already did. Submitted my letter this morning. They're going to announce it this afternoon. She looked up at me. But I didn't come here because the board asked me to. I came here because I owe you and your family an apology. A real one. Not a legal settlement or a press release. An actual human apology. She took a shaky breath. Mr. Fisher, I am deeply sorry for the pain I've caused your family. I'm sorry I made your son feel like he was unwelcome in his own neighborhood. I'm sorry I turned what should have been a simple accommodation into a legal battle. I'm sorry I was so focused on rules and property values that I forgot basic human decency. I studied her face. The tears were real. The remorse seemed genuine. But that didn't change what she'd done. Mrs. Morrison, your apology is noted, but it doesn't fix anything. You didn't just hurt my son's feelings. You tried to take away his independence. You tried to trap him in his own house. You made him cry and ask me if the ramp was his fault. Do you understand that? Yes. My son almost died last year. He spent 9 months in physical therapy, working harder than most adults ever work, to walk again. And you looked at the ramp that allows him to leave his home and decided it was ugly. That's not a mistake, Mrs. Morrison. That's a values problem. You're right. She nodded. You're absolutely right. I can't fix what I did. I can't take back the hurt. All I can do is apologize and try to be better. Before I could respond, the door opened behind me. Marcus stood there in his pajamas, walker in hand, looking sleepy and confused. Dad! Who are you talking to? Patricia's face crumpled when she saw him. Hello, Marcus. I'm Mrs. Morrison. We met a few weeks ago. Marcus's expression clouded. You're the lady who said my ramp was bad. Yes, I am. And I was wrong. Patricia knelt down, not easy for a woman in her late 50s, so she was at his eye level. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Your ramp isn't bad. It's not ugly. It's not ruining anything. It's important and necessary, and you should be proud of it. Then why did you say we had to take it away? Because I was being foolish. I was so worried about rules and how things looked that I forgot about what really matters, which is that everyone in our neighborhood should feel welcome and should be able to get in and out of their homes easily. I'm very, very sorry I made you feel bad. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, processing. Then, my dad says everyone makes mistakes. Mom says the important thing is whether you fix them. Your parents are very smart, and you're right. I made a mistake. I'm trying to fix it. Okay. Marcus paused. Do you like ice cream? The question caught Patricia off guard. Yes? I like ice cream. Me too. Strawberry is my favorite. Mine too, Patricia said, and a small, sad smile crossed her face. Marcus looked up at me. Dad, Can Mrs. Morrison come have ice cream with us sometime? After she fixes her mistake? I looked at Sarah, who had appeared in the doorway behind Marcus. She gave me a slight nod. Yeah, buddy, I said. After she fixes her mistake, Mrs. Morrison can come have ice cream. Patricia stood up, wiping her eyes. Thank you, Marcus. That's very kind of you. She looked at me. Mr. Carrington is calling you this afternoon with the board's decision. I don't know what they're going to offer, but I hope you get everything you're asking for. You deserve it. She walked back to her car, and I watched her drive away. Sarah came out onto the porch. That took courage, she said quietly. Coming here, facing us, apologizing in person. It doesn't change what she did. No, but it's a start. James Carrington called at exactly 3 p.m. Mr. Fisher, I've consulted with the board. They're prepared to meet your terms. I put him on speaker so Sarah and Rodriguez, who was on a three-way call, could hear. All of them? Yes. The board will immediately approve your ramp with no conditions, waive all fines and penalties, issue a formal written apology to your family, and revise the HOA bylaws to explicitly allow accessibility modifications in compliance with the Fair Housing Act. The revised bylaws will be drafted by a disability rights attorney and submitted to all homeowners for ratification. And Mrs. Morrison? Mrs. Morrison submitted her resignation this morning. It was accepted by the board. Tom Chen has agreed to serve as interim president. Rodriguez's voice came through the line. Mr. Carrington, this is Diego Rodriguez, counsel for the Fishers. We'll need all of this in writing. A formal settlement agreement signed by all board members with the apology letter attached. Of course. I'll have everything drafted by tomorrow morning. One more thing, I said. I want the board to commit to an annual review of all HOA policies by a disability rights organization. Make sure this never happens again. There was a pause. That's not one of your original demands. I'm making it one now. You have a choice, Mr. Carrington. You can agree to this additional term and we settle today. Or I can turn this into a crusade. I can do media interviews, speak at every HOA reform conference in the country, make Riverside Estates the poster child for ableist housing discrimination. Your move. I'll have to consult with the board. You have 1 hour. He called back in 45 minutes. The board agrees. Annual policy review by a qualified disability rights organization. Rodriguez drafted the settlement agreement that night. It was comprehensive, legally binding, and included everything we'd asked for. The board signed it on September 28th. The formal apology letter arrived the next day. To the Fisher family, on behalf of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association Board of Directors, we offer our sincerest apologies for the distress and harm caused by our handling of your request for accommodation. We failed in our fundamental responsibility to create an inclusive, welcoming community. Our actions were not only legally wrong, but morally wrong. Marcus deserves to live in a neighborhood where his medical needs are respected and his independence is celebrated, not challenged. We are taking immediate steps to ensure this never happens again. We have revised our bylaws, committed to ongoing education, and will work with disability rights organizations to make Riverside Estates truly accessible for all residents. We hope, in time, you can forgive our failures and that we can rebuild trust with your family. With deepest regret, the Riverside Estates HOA Board of Directors. It was signed by all 7 board members. The media coverage continued for another week. Good Morning America did end up calling, but I declined the interview. The battle was over, and I didn't want Marcus to become the poster child for disability rights if he didn't need to be. Maria wrote a follow-up story. HOA reverses decision, apologizes to disabled child after national outcry. It was shared almost as widely as the first article. Tommy Chen used our story in his advocacy work, presenting it as a case study at disability rights conferences. Other families facing similar HOA battles reached out, asking for advice, for resources, for hope. Rodriguez estimated we'd saved ourselves at least $50,000 in legal fees and potential fines by going public and forcing a quick settlement. "Never underestimate the power of a good story," he told me. "Courts are slow. Public opinion is fast. You weaponized compassion, and it worked." The neighborhood reaction was mixed. Some residents were embarrassed by the negative publicity. Others were supportive, bringing welcome baskets and apologies for not speaking up earlier. A few were openly hostile, blaming us for making a scene and damaging property values. George, our neighbor, summed it up best. "Any property value damage was done by Patricia and that board, not by you. They made us look like the kind of place that bullies disabled kids. You just pointed out the truth." Tom Chen, the new HOA president, came by 2 weeks after taking office. He was in his early 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "I wanted to introduce myself properly," he said, "and to let you know that things are going to be different in the future. My daughter uses a wheelchair. She has spina bifida. I've dealt with this kind of ableist nonsense for years. It stops here." He outlined his plans. Accessibility audits of all common areas, revised bylaws that prioritized inclusion, education programs for board members and residents. "I'm also establishing a community fund," he said, "for residents who need accessibility modifications but can't afford them. No family should have to fight for basic accommodations." Patricia Morrison kept her word. She came by 3 weeks after resigning, bringing strawberry ice cream. She and Marcus sat on the porch with the ramp, and talked. I don't know what they said to each other, but when she left, Marcus seemed lighter. "She's not a bad person," he told me later. "She just forgot to think about other people's feelings." Out of the mouths of babes. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in March, Marcus walked down our ramp using only his leg brace. No walker, no wheelchair, just his own 2 feet carrying him forward. Sarah grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. We both had tears in our eyes. "Did you see that?" Marcus called back to us. "I did it! No walker!" "I saw, buddy," I called back. "I'm so proud of you." Monica, his physical therapist, had warned us this moment might never come. The nerve damage was extensive. The odds were against him. But Marcus had worked, fought, persevered for nearly 2 years, and now he was walking. The ramp was still there, would always be there, because some days his leg hurt too much for the brace. Some days he needed the walker. Some days the wheelchair was the right tool. But on this day, he walked down that ramp on his own 2 feet, and the whole world felt possible. Later that morning, I got a call from Rodriguez. "Hey man, you sitting down?" "Should I be?" "The Fair Housing Act case we filed, not yours, a different family in Northern California, similar HOA bullshit. Remember I told you about it?" "Yeah, the court just ruled. Not only did the family win, but the judge issued a really broad opinion about HOA obligations under the Fair Housing Act. It's going to make it much harder for HOAs to pull this kind of discrimination going forward. Your case, the publicity you generated, it helped build momentum for this. So we made a difference? You made a difference. Other families won't have to go through what you went through. That's the real victory." I thought about that after we hung up. About Patricia Morrison, who'd made a terrible mistake but had owned it and changed. About Tom Chen, who was transforming our neighborhood into something better. About the families who wouldn't have to fight because we'd fought first. That could be what courage looks like. Not the battlefield kind, not the kind that gets you medals. The everyday kind. The kind that says, "This is wrong, and I'm not going to accept it," even if it's easier to stay quiet. I'm writing this from my porch. The ramp is still here, weathered now, but solid. Marcus is 9 years old, in 4th grade, thriving. He plays adaptive soccer, has a dozen friends, and walks without assistance most days. The walker sits in his room, ready when he needs it, but he hasn't needed it much lately. The neighborhood has changed. Tom Chen served 2 years as HOA president before passing the role to another resident, a retired teacher whose son has autism. The bylaws have been completely overhauled. There are now 3 families with accessibility ramps. The community pool has a lift. The playground was redesigned with wheelchair-accessible equipment. Patricia Morrison moved away 6 months after resigning. But before she left, she volunteered for a local disability rights organization, helping other families navigate HOA disputes. She sent Marcus a birthday card last year with a handwritten note. "Thank you for teaching an old woman that rules aren't as important as people. Keep being brave." Sarah framed it and hung it in Marcus's room. People sometimes ask me if I regret how we handled things, if I wish we'd fought differently or compromised or stayed quiet. The answer is always no, because that ramp, that simple wooden structure that someone once called an aesthetic problem, represents something bigger than accessibility. It represents dignity. It represents the principle that no one should have to hide their disability or their medical equipment or their need for accommodation. It represents a refusal to accept no when no is wrong. And it represents what happens when you stand up, gather your resources, and fight for what matters. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Because some battles are worth fighting. Some hills are worth dying on.